Even now, 5 years later, after all the chaos, all the fighting, and all the flour dust has finally settled, I still remember that smell, that specific, heavy scent of Redwood Creek. It wasn't just the yeast, or the damp Oregon rain, or the old cold wood of the bakery where I grew up. It was all that mixed up with the faint, persistent smell of failure. And that, my friends, is what my whole world smelled like. My name is Caleb Thorne, and for 17 years, my entire universe revolved around my grandmother, Elspeth, and the simple, brutal arithmetic of a small-town bakery. Revenue minus costs equals not enough. I loved baking, don't get me wrong. There's a kind of quiet magic in watching flour and water and time turn into something meaningful, something real. It's almost alchemy. But I wanted the bright lights, the big city kitchens, the places where my skills would be celebrated, not just survived. I wanted out. I was terrified of being trapped there, becoming another ghost in the damp Pacific Northwest fog, just like everyone else who stayed behind, stuck in that slow, sad decay. The Hearthstone, our family bakery, was an institution that had stopped making institutions proud. It was a beautiful, weary old building, but every floorboard squeaked a different tune of debt. Every chipped teacup whispered warnings about the future. I felt like I was sleeping in a coffin of stale bread, and every morning I woke up tasting the dust of a dying dream. My great-grandmother had saved the place during the Depression with a legendary recipe. But in the age of Insta stories and corporate coffee chains, tradition felt less like a bedrock and more like a heavy anchor dragging us under. The day my life got completely derailed, the day I received my unwilling call to adventure, was, of course, a miserably gray Tuesday. Elspeth, tough as an old redwood herself, but 70-something, was trying to haul a 50-pound sack of whole rye up the narrow basement stairs. She insisted on doing it herself because we were too proud and, frankly, too broke to pay for a delivery guy to drop it right in the back. I was distracted, messing with a new algorithm on my phone, ignoring the groan of the old wooden stairs. And then I heard it. A sharp crack, a yelp that was cut short, and then nothing but the sound of dry rye grains scattering like tiny, terrified marbles on the concrete floor. It wasn't fatal, thank God, but it was bad. A complex break in her leg. Suddenly, she was in a sterile hospital bed, and I was standing in her kitchen surrounded by the silence of 2 generations of debt, holding the entire, collapsing world of the Hearthstone in my sweaty, panicked 17-year-old hands. I felt the full, crushing weight of failure, not just my own, but the cumulative failure of the whole damn town. The bank, predictably, didn't wait for the flowers to wilt. 2 days later, a crisp, white envelope arrived. It was polite, utterly devoid of mercy, and gave us 30 days. 30 days to turn a trickle of sales into a torrent, or they'd take the land. I tried. Oh, God, I tried everything I'd learned from those flashy internet bakers. I watched all the tutorials. I stayed up for 48 hours straight, whipping up vibrant green matcha croissants, which, let me tell you, are an abomination in rural Oregon. I even created a high-concept Instagram account, hashtagging teaching small-town charm, which felt like the most cynical lie I'd ever told. The locals walked in, sniffed suspiciously at my artisanal, overpriced efforts, muttered something about needing a proper white loaf, bought a plain white loaf, and walked out. The balance sheet looked the same. A steady, inexorable plunge toward zero. I was failing, fast, and that old, familiar panic. The fear of being permanently stuck and responsible for the final ruin of my family's legacy, it was paralyzing me. I stood there, staring at the empty cash register, my hands coated in useless green flour, and I thought, this is it. I'm done. I pictured myself just locking the door, driving away, and sending Elspeth a postcard saying, "Sorry, Grandma, I tried. But this place was dead long before you fell." But then, one night, right around midnight, fueled by despair and bad coffee, I was rooting through the dusty back of an unused storage cupboard, a place I'd avoided for years because it was dusty and full of old guilt, and my hand brushed against something small, wrapped tightly in a canvas rag. It was a ledger. Not the kind you use for finances, but the kind a true baker uses, a recipe journal, bound in leather and filled with Elspeth's mother's elegant, spidery handwriting. It was history, tangible and heavy. I flipped through the pages, seeing the ghost of the Depression, the shadow of a different era, until I got to the very last page. Written in ink so faded it was barely visible, was a single, cryptic entry. The Redwood Starter. Use the heart of the ancient grain. Let the mountain breathe. I knew what it was. It was the legend. The mythical sourdough starter that everyone in Redwood Creek whispered about. The one that supposedly made the bread so perfect it saved the bakery during the Great Depression. The Redwood Starter. Finding that entry was like finding the key to the treasure chest, but it only led to a riddle. What was the ancient grain? Where did the mountain breathe? I was a modern kid. I wanted a QR code, not an existential puzzle. And this is the moment the true villain walks in. Every great story needs an antagonist who isn't just evil, but who represents everything you hate about yourself. All your cynicism, all your impatience, all your modern ambition without soul. Enter Victor Vic Sterling. Vic had just opened the Artisan Grind down the highway, a sleek, minimalist coffee and pastry chain that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine, not in our rusty, forgotten town. He offered clean lines, imported everything, and, most importantly, he offered cash. He'd been subtly buying up all the local history, the old timber mill, the unused general store, and he'd been circling the hearthstone like a vulture waiting for its last breath. He walked into my failing bakery, not even bothering to look at my subpar matcha croissants, and he leaned against my counter, hands tucked into the pockets of his tailored designer jeans. He smelled like expensive cologne and pure, clinical efficiency. "Caleb," he said, his voice smooth and oily, like expensive salad dressing. "How's your grandmother doing? Terrible shame, that accident. Look, kid, I'll cut to the chase. I know you got the bank on your neck. I'm offering you double the asking price for the property. Don't worry about the business. I'll level the place and build something useful. A drive-through, maybe." I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "It's not for sale, Vic. It's my family's. It's my grandmother's." He chuckled, a low, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. "Is it, though? Or is it a liability? You want to be a big city baker, right? This old ruin is just chaining you here, Caleb. Take the money, get out, buy yourself a one-way ticket to San Francisco. Let me put this place out of its misery." Misery? He didn't just want the property. He wanted to erase the history, the struggle, the very essence of Redwood Creek that I simultaneously loved and loathed. I looked down at the handwritten ledger I was still clutching. This old book, this fragile thing, was suddenly more valuable than all his corporate money. "Get out, Vic," I said, finally finding my voice, and it was rough, like the sound of grinding wheat. "The hearthstone is closed to people who think history is disposable. And you, Vic, you're just disposable." That was my crossing of the first threshold. I had refused the easy way out, Vic's money, and committed to the quest, though I still had no idea how to win a war against a man who had already bought half the town. To solve the riddle of the Redwood Starter, I had to do the one thing I'd spent my entire youth avoiding: talk to the old-timers, the people who stayed. I sought out Mrs. Petrov, a woman who looked like she was knitted from the same gray yarn as the fog itself, and who lived in a cabin halfway up the mountain, surrounded by old books and strange herbal remedies. She was the reluctant gatekeeper to the town's secrets. I showed her the ledger. She didn't look at me. She looked through me, her eyes seeing the ghosts of the past. "The ancient grain, Caleb? That's the Yarrow Creek wheat. Grows only on the north slopes, only on land that hasn't been chemically touched in 50 years. It's tough, it's wild, it's what gives our bread its soul." Then came the punch to the gut, the brutal setback that told me I was playing against a stacked deck. She paused, looking genuinely sorrowful, pulling her knitted shawl tighter. "Vic Sterling bought that whole north slope last month, Caleb. Said he's going to turn it into a vineyard. He's plowing it next week." I felt the blood drain from my face. It all clicked. This wasn't a business competition. It was a scorched earth strategy. Vic knew about the legend. He knew the source of the magic, and he was deliberately removing the essential ingredient. He was trying to erase the town's history, not just buy its land. My first thought was rage. My second was utter defeat. My third, thankfully, was a breakthrough. Thanks again to Mrs. Petrov. "The mountain breathe," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. "Means it needs air. The starter, Caleb, it's not the flower, it's the yeast. The wild yeast that lives on the bark of the old redwoods up high, where the air is clean, far from the town's pollutants." I spent 3 miserable, freezing days climbing, scraping bark, mixing tiny batches with regular flour, and failing spectacularly. I was exhausted, bruised, and about to give up when I finally found the perfect spot, a hollow log overlooking the... "Mr. Jenkins," I said, placing the redwood starter loaf on the counter between the bank manager and the antagonist's checkbook. "The hearthstone is late on its payments, yes, but a business is valued by its assets and its future revenue. I would like to offer 2 things as collateral. First, this bread. It's made with the legendary redwood starter, a recipe lost to this town for 60 years. Second, the entire next 2 years of its projected sales, secured by these gentlemen." I motioned to the door. The postmaster, a man named George who hadn't smiled since 1998 but had a reputation for being the most trusted man in the county, stepped forward and held up a thick notarized document. "We all bought into Caleb's idea," George announced, his voice surprisingly strong echoing in the small room. "He's making the miracle bread again. We, the citizens of Redwood Creek, have agreed to collectively buy $20,000 worth of gift certificates right now, in advance, to ensure the hearthstone gets back on its feet. We don't need your chain stores, Sterling. We need our bread." Vic Sterling's face was a study in controlled rage, a perfect cinematic defeat. He had bought the land, he had cornered the market on the grain, but he had forgotten the one ingredient you couldn't buy with money: community. "This is ridiculous," Vic spat, his voice losing its smoothness, becoming a hiss. "You're taking a sentimental loan from a bunch of fog-addled old people based on bread? A starter? You think you can sell this rustic nonsense to the modern world, Caleb? You'll be back here in 6 months begging for my check, crying about your debt." "Maybe," I replied, grabbing a knife and slicing the perfect loaf down the middle. The sound was deafeningly crisp. I handed a generous slice to Mr. Jenkins, who immediately took a huge bite. His eyes widened, and he actually stopped looking miserable. "But for today, Vic," I finished, a small genuine smile finally creeping onto my face, "I'm only concerned with selling it to the people who actually call this place home. And right now, my home is definitely not for sale." Mr. Jenkins, still chewing, shook his head, crumbs scattering on the foreclosure documents. "The advance payment is unconventional but legitimate collateral. The bank will restructure the loan. The hearthstone is secure." Vic didn't say a word. He just balled up his check, threw it into the nearest garbage bin, and stalked out, his polished Italian shoes kicking up dust from the ancient wooden porch. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. I had done it. I had saved the bakery. Vic Sterling moved out of town within the month. I had become the hero of the story, the kid who chose tradition over trend, heart over hurry, and community over corporate cash. I was no longer a ghost. I was the anchor of the hearthstone. I kept the promise, too. I taught Mrs. Petrov how to maintain the starter, ensuring the secret lived on in the hands of the community. I started teaching the local kids the old baking ways. The hearthstone is thriving now, selling out every day, powered by the miracle of the redwood starter. But here's the controversial part, the part I think about every day, the part that doesn't fit neatly into a feel-good ending. I saved the town with a secret. The redwood starter is the most powerful thing I own. I now have the ability to make bread that is objectively better than anything else within a 50-mile radius. A brand, a unique selling point. I could have bottled that starter, branded it, and sold it online for a fortune, achieving my big city dreams my own way. Instead, I taught Mrs. Petrov. I gave away my leverage, my golden ticket, to the community. Was that courage? Was that the selfless heroism of a small-town boy? Or was it fear in disguise? The fear of truly succeeding on my own terms, outside the safety and comfort of my small world. By staying, by becoming the anchor, did I trade my big city future for a life I always claimed to hate? The town is saved, yes, and my grandmother is healing. But sometimes, late at night, I look at the redwood starter bubbling away, and I wonder if I was meant to save the community, or if I was meant to use the miracle to save myself. That's the choice we all face, isn't it? The pull between responsibility to the past and ambition for the future. The hearthstone is thriving now, but I'm still here, still just a kid, just changed. I made my choice, but I honestly don't know if it was the right one. Just the necessary one, so what about you? If you were Caleb, standing on that porch, holding the one secret that could change your life forever, a secret that belonged to your family but was vital to your entire community, would you have shared it? Would you have stayed, or would you have used the momentum to finally leave? Where does true justice lie when money and history collide? I want to know your take on this. Seriously, drop a comment below. Tell me if I was a fool or a hero. And hey, if you liked hearing this story, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps keep the oven warm, so to speak. Thanks for listening,